to push aside man, supplanting the old spirit of cooperation with him in all the affairs of life, is very disappointing to me. Although he told a reporter in later years that he sometimes felt that by not marrying, he had made too great a sacrifice to his work. 31. Tesla chose to never pursue or engage in any known relationships, instead finding all the stimulation he needed in his work. Tesla was asocial and prone to seclude himself with his work. 135, 240, 241. However, when he did engage in social life, many people spoke very positively and admiringly of Tesla. Robert Underwood Johnson described him as attaining a distinguished sweetness, sincerity, modesty, refinement, generosity, and force. 31. His secretary, Dorothy Scarrett, wrote, his genial smile and nobility of bearing always denoted gentlemanly characteristics that were so ingrained in his soul. 237. Tesla's friend, Julian Hawthorne wrote, seldom did one meet a scientist or engineer who was also a poet, a philosopher, an appreciator of in music, a linguist, and a connoisseur of food and drink. 242. Tesla was a good friend of Francis Marion Crawford, Robert Underwood Johnson. 243. Stanford White. 244. Fritz Lowenstein, George Scurf, and Kenneth Swayze. 245, 246, 247. In middle age, Tesla became a close friend of Mark Twain. They spent a lot of time together in his lab and elsewhere. 243. Twain notably described Tesla's induction motor invention as the most valuable patent since the telephone. 248. At a party thrown by actress Sarah Bernhardt in 1896, Tesla met Indian Hindu monk Swami Vivekananda. Vivekananda later wrote that Tesla said he could demonstrate mathematically the relationship between matter and energy, something Vivekananda hoped would give a scientific foundation to Vedanta cosmology. 249, 250. The meeting with Swami Vivekananda stimulated Tesla's interest in Eastern science, which led to Tesla studying Hindu and Vedic philosophy for a number of years. 251. Tesla later wrote an article titled Man's Greatest Achievement using Sanskrit terms Akasha and Prana to describe the relationship between matter and energy. 252. 253. In the late 1920s, Tesla befriended George Sylvester Vyrick, a poet, writer, mystic, and later, a Nazi propagandist. Tesla occasionally attended dinner parties held by Vyrick and his wife. 254, 255. Tesla could be harsh at times and openly expressed disgust for overweight people, such as when he fired a secretary because of her weight. 256. He was quick to criticize clothing. On several occasions, Tesla directed a subordinate to go home and change her dress. 238. When Thomas Edison died, in 1931, Tesla contributed the only negative opinion to the New York Times. Buried in an extensive coverage of Edison's life, he had no hobby, cared for no sort of amusement of any kind, and lived in utter disregard of most elementary rules of hygiene. His method was inefficient in the extreme, for an immense ground had to be covered to get anything at all unless blind chance intervened, and, at first, I was almost a sorry witness of his doings, knowing that just a little theory and calculation would have saved him 90% of the labor. But he had a veritable contempt for book learning and mathematical knowledge, trusting himself entirely to his inventor's instinct and practical American sense. 257. Sleep habits. Tesla claimed never to sleep more than 2 hours per night. 258. However, he did admit to dozing from time to time to recharge his batteries. 259. During his second year of study at Graz, Tisler developed a passionate proficiency for billiards, chess, and card playing, sometimes spending more than 48 hours in a stretch at a games table. 260. On one occasion at his laboratory, Tisler worked for a period of 84 hours without rest. 261. Kenneth Swessey, a journalist whom Tisler had befriended, confirmed that Tisler rarely slept. Swessey recalled one morning when Tisler called him at 3 a.m., "I was sleeping in my room like one needed. Suddenly, the telephone ring awakened me." Tisler spoke animatedly, with pauses, as he worked out a problem, comparing one theory to another, commenting, and when he felt he had arrived at the solution, he suddenly closed the telephone. 259. Work and dining habits. Tisler worked every day from 9 a.m. until 6 p.m. or later, with dinner at exactly 8:10 p.m., at Delmonico's restaurant and later the Waldorf Astoria Hotel. Tisler then telephoned his dinner order to the head waiter, who also could be the only one to serve him. The meal was required to be ready at 8 o'clock. He dined alone, except on the rare occasions when he would give a dinner to a group to meet his social obligations. Tisler then resumed his work, often until 3 a.m. 262. For exercise, Tisler walked between 8 and 10 miles, 13 and 16 kilometers, per day. He curled his toes 100 times for each foot every night, saying that it stimulated his brain cells. 259. In an interview with newspaper editor Arthur Brisbane, Tisler said that he did not believe in telepathy, stating, "Suppose I made up my mind to murder you," he said, "in a second you would know it. Now, isn't that wonderful? By what process does the mind get at all this?" In the same interview, Tisler said that he believed that all fundamental laws could be reduced to one. 235. Tisler became a vegetarian in his later years, living on only milk, bread, honey, and vegetable juices. 220. 263. Views and beliefs. On experimental and theoretical physics. Tisler disagreed with the theory of atoms being composed of smaller subatomic particles, stating there was no such thing as an electron creating an electric charge. He believed that if electrons existed at all, there were some fourth state of matter or subatom that could exist only in an experimental vacuum, and that they had nothing to do with electricity. 264. 265. Tisler believed that atoms are immutable, they could not change state or be split in any way. He was a believer in the 19th century concept of an all-pervasive ether that transmitted electrical energy. 266. Tisler was generally antagonistic towards theories about the conversion of matter into energy. 267. He was also critical of Einstein's theory of relativity, saying, "I hold that space cannot be curved, for the simple reason that it can have no properties. It might as well be said that God has properties. He has not, but only attributes, and these are of our own making. Of properties we can only speak when dealing with matter filling the space. To say that in the presence of large bodies space becomes curved is equivalent to stating that something can act upon nothing. I, for one, refuse to subscribe to such a view." 268. In 1935 he described relativity as a beggar wrapped in purple whom ignorant people take for a king, and said his own experiments had measured the speed of cosmic rays from Arcturus as 50 times the speed of light. 269. Tisler claimed to have developed his own physical principle regarding matter and energy that he started working on in 1892, 267, and in 1937, at age 81, claimed in a letter to have completed a dynamic theory of gravity that would put an end to idle speculations and false conceptions, as that of curved space. He stated that the theory was worked out in all details and that he hoped to soon give it to the world. 270. Further elucidation of his theory was never found in his writings. 271. On society. Tisler is widely considered by his biographers to have been a humanist in philosophical outlook. 272. 273. This did not preclude Tisler, like many of his era, from becoming a proponent of an imposed selective breeding version of eugenics. Tisler expressed the belief that human pity had come to interfere with the natural ruthless workings of nature. Though his argumentation did not depend on a concept of a master race or the inherent superiority of one person over another, he advocated for eugenics. In a 1937 interview he stated, "Man's new sense of pity began to interfere with the ruthless workings of nature. The only method compatible with our notions of civilization and the race is to prevent the breeding of unfit by sterilization and the deliberate guidance of the mating instinct." The trend of opinion among eugenists is that we must make marriage more difficult. Certainly no one who Tisler c. 1885 is not a desirable parent should be permitted to produce progeny. A century from now it will no more occur to a normal person to mate with a person eugenically unfit than to marry a habitual criminal. 274. In 1926, Tisler commented on the ills of the social subservience of women and the struggle of women toward gender equality, and indicated that humanity's future would be run by queen bees. He believed that women would become the dominant sex in the future. 275. Tisler made predictions about the relevant issues of a post-World War I environment in a printed article entitled "Science and Discovery Are the Great Forces Which Will Lead to the Consummation of the War," the 20th of December, 1914. 276. Tisler believed that the League of Nations was not a remedy for the times and issues. 23. On religion. Tisler was raised an Orthodox Christian. Later in life he did not consider himself to be a believer in the orthodox sense, said he opposed religious fanaticism, and said Buddhism and Christianity are the greatest religions both in number of disciples and in importance. 277. He also said to me, "The universe is simply a great machine which never came into being and never will end, and what we call soul or spirit is nothing more than the sum of the functionings of the body. When this functioning ceases, the soul or the spirit ceases likewise." 277. Literary works. Tisler wrote a number of books and articles for magazines and journals. 278. Among his books are My Inventions, the autobiography of Nikola Tesla, compiled and edited by Ben Johnston in 1983 from a series of 1919 magazine articles by Tesla which were republished in 1977. The Fantastic Inventions of Nikola Tesla, 1993, compiled and edited by David Hatcher Childress, and the Tesla Papers. Many of Tesla's writings are freely available online. 279, including the article "The Problem of Increasing Human Energy," published in the Century magazine in 1900. 280, and the article "Experiments with Alternate Currents of High Potential and High Frequency," published in his book Inventions, Researches and Writings of Nikola Tesla. 281, 282, Legacy and Honors. Tesla's legacy has endured in books, films, radio, TV, music, live theater, comics, and video games. The impact of the technologies invented or envisioned by Tesla is a recurring theme in several types of science fiction. See also Charles Protus Steinmetz, a contemporaneous electrical pioneer in alternating current and high voltage research. Michael Faraday. Atmospheric electricity.
Yes, let's stop. We can maybe keep it in 5 parts. Delete. Let's stop the video because we can maybe keep it in 5 parts. I will charge my camcorder, take a break, go to restroom, then I will continue reading. It's not too